Broadcasting from the Community Service Radio Studio at the Pop Music Academy in Sellersburg, Indiana, welcome to Dangerous Subversive Radio. Prepare to open your mind and question everything. Good evening once again. Welcome to Dangerous Subversive Radio, Episode 8. Can you believe it? We've been doing this for 2 months.
Man, that's great.
I myself am having a blast. I'm your host, Tim Rotalik, joined as always by the man without whom this show would not exist, the man behind the curtain, master engineer and producer Jackie Smith.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, how many times has this happened to you? You're one day away from you're doing your YouTube show. You got something going. You're not really loving it. And then suddenly something falls right out of Facebook into your lap and thoughts start pouring out of your brain like mental lava. I mean, really, how many times does that happen? Does that happen to you, Jackie?
Yes.
Okay. At least so it's not just me.
But not as often as it happens with you.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Well, this week it was a post on Facebook. This is a thread that I had contributed to several months ago, and yesterday it came back around. The original post was complaining about people tipping or not tipping in restaurants. I used to work in a restaurant many years ago, several restaurants as a matter of fact. But I was working in a restaurant in Arvada, Colorado called the Armadillo.
Wait, I've been there.
Yeah, and if you've never been there, if you're in the Denver area, you need to go to the Armadillo. It is the standard by which all other Mexican food is judged.
It's superb.
Well, actually, it was, but that's another story. Okay, so anyhow, when I was working there on Sunday nights, the Armadillo had 99-cent kids' meals. And there was a woman who used to come into the restaurant with 4 or 5 children. After a while, I began to notice that Sunday was the only time I would ever see her. There was never a man with her. It was her and these children. And after a while, it dawned on me that this was the 99-cent kids' meals was the only time, Sundays were the only time she could afford to take these kids out to dinner. And so from then on, whenever I saw her come in, I would ask to have her sat in my station. She never left a tip, and I never cared. So anyhow, I got lots of positive comments when I made that post, and then it went away for several weeks, and then not several weeks, several months, and then it came back around with a new comment on it. And the comment, I don't have it so that I can read it verbatim, but the gist of it was that instead of being mad at the person who doesn't tip, you should be mad at the employer who requires you to work for tips. Tips should be extra. Waiters and waitresses should work for minimum wage, and the tips should be extra. And not only that, but the tips should be divided between the waitress and the bussers and the kitchen staff because they are so often left out. I had a really good reply to her, which I'm not going to go into right now, but there is a world of inference in there. There is so much in between the lines in that statement. For one thing, I doubt that this woman who made the comments was actually a waitress, because if she was, she would have known that the kitchen staff actually get paid a significantly higher wage than the waiters and waitresses. They do work for tips, and they get a very low wage, sometimes as low as $2.50 an hour. But in a good restaurant on a good night, you can make $120 in tips. So the money is not really bad, being a waiter or a waitress. And she was saying that basically that we should raise everyone's wages to minimum wage in the restaurant industry. But the thing is that these days, there is a huge clamor to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Yeah, we want $15 an hour. Okay. Well, employers requiring anything from you, if for that to be an issue, you would have to make the assumption, and this is one of those assumptions that I believe was hidden in this statement, was that jobs or companies exist to provide workers with jobs. That's a huge assumption. Now, there are some places where it come close, and one of them is the auto industry. One of the big auto companies, I actually heard them described as a benefits company that happens to build cars. Now, some employers might start out that way. They might say, hey, I want to give some people some jobs, so I'll start this company. I don't think that's many of them. Most employers start out wanting to make a better job for themselves. They are in it to make themselves rich. Nothing wrong with that. And if they start getting successful, somewhere along the way, their job gets so big that they have to hire someone to help them do it. Think about that. Your employer's job got so big that he had to hire you to help him do it. Most people refer to my job. I've got a job. But you know what? I don't refer to it as my job. I refer to it as the job I do. I work there 40 hours a week, but that job does not belong to me. The fact is, your job belongs to your employer. He just hires you to do it. Another inference, maybe not in this statement, but a lot of them, is that employers really should offer their employees benefits. I had one person who was talking about a company that's based in Louisville, Kentucky, where I live, Papa John's Pizza. And this person was just so outraged because Papa John's would not, or I forget the guy's name, John something, who actually is Papa John. But this guy was outraged because he does not offer his employees health insurance. And I felt like saying to him, well, why does it fall to your employer to give you health insurance? Because you need it. Okay, well, there's also several other things you need. You need food, you need water, you need shelter, you need transportation. Why does it not fall to your employer? If the rationale is that you need it, so your employer should provide it, why does your employer not, should they not provide you with food and water and shelter and transportation? When you're talking about employers, employees, wages, of course, in the bigger picture, you're talking about economics. And a lot of people don't know this. Economics comes from two Greek words. The word oikos, which means the home, and which in those cases actually included your family, your extended family, your slaves, and your estate. That was all considered your home. And nomos, which is management, law, or principle. So economics really comes out to either the law of the home or management of the home. And the reason I bring this up is this show is actually about politics, right? So why am I injecting economics into it? Well, the reason is that try as they might, politicians just cannot help but interfering in economics. And it is interfering. Economics is a set of principles and laws which works by itself. It is self-regulating as long as it is allowed to. Politicians getting involved in economics is interference. Now, I'm sure if any of you have spent any time on Facebook, you have seen this graphic right here. If you can't see it big enough on the screen, I will read it for you. The average income in America is $42,000. Congress has 382 millionaires. They haven't passed a jobs bill, but keep giving themselves tax cuts and raises. It's time for term limits. Now, this is a subject all in itself, which I would dearly love to get into because I have some definite opinions about this. And I am fully aware that that is two Republicans on the screen there. Does not matter, okay? The principle holds true, and I would love to have that discussion sometime in the future, but there is one thing in this post or this graphic that I'd like to zero in on. They haven't passed a jobs bill. This, of course, implies that it's Congress's job to provide us with jobs. that it is the federal government's job or place to provide us with jobs. I don't happen to think it is. Now, that has been done several times in history, several places. They have decided that it is the government's job to provide the people with jobs. That's in places like China and North Korea and the Soviet Union. Now, governments can do things to help the business climate. They can do things to help the economy. And I believe one of the best things Congress could do for the American worker would be to lower the corporate income tax to 0%.
Wait, Tim. Then corporations wouldn't be paying any taxes at all.
Surprise! They don't pay any taxes now.
Really?
No, they have never paid taxes. They never will pay taxes. Corporations do not pay taxes. They only collect them from you. This happens anytime you tax a business. You tax a business, that tax becomes part of the cost of doing business. And when the cost of business goes up, you don't accept smaller and smaller and shrinking profits. When the cost of business goes up, you raise the cost of your price of your product. Gasoline is a good example of this. Now, not many people have much sympathy for huge oil companies because they make record billions of profits every year. The fact is they also spend record billions in order to do that every year. What's really important is not their profit, but what is their profit margin. Okay? And if you do not know the difference between a profit and a profit margin, you need to learn it. It's an important concept. Their profit margin is the same as it's been for a long time, about 10 cents a gallon. Okay. Now, the government comes along and for whatever the reason they're going to do it, simply to raise revenue or to punish those evil oil companies for their obscene profits, they come and they slap a 20 cent per gallon tax on the gasoline. Okay. 20 cents isn't much, right? Except that if their profit margin is only 10 cents a gallon and you tax them 20 cents a gallon, you've eliminated 100% of their profits and then some. So are they supposed to just go out of business? What they're going to do is they're going to raise the cost of a gallon of gas by 20 cents. Anytime you put a tax on a corporation, it raises you put a 5% tax on them, they're going to raise their price 5% and pass the cost of that tax on to the consumer. So anytime you raise corporate taxes, you're raising taxes on the American people. It comes out of every one of our pockets. So, but still, I mean, huge corporations like Walmart and Wendy's, they could just take that tax, right? They could absorb that. Well, there's two big assumptions in that. And the first is that huge corporations like Walmart or Wendy's employ most of the people in the country. Actually, big corporations like that are only 0.3% of all the employers in the United States. 89% of the companies in the United States have 20 or fewer employees. Small business constitutes 89%, nearly 90% of all the companies in the country. Now, most of these are still incorporated because incorporation has a lot of legal benefits that can protect the owners of the corporation. So, and the second assumption that people make about this is that most people think that the average profit margin for any business is around 36%. Do you know what it actually is? Somewhere between 3 and 5%. 3% profit. Now, I've often stated in the past that I think 10% is a reasonable profit. I still believe that, but hardly any small businesses ever get there. They're stuck around in that 3% range. So yeah, that's a good idea. Let's raise corporate taxes on everyone because 0.3% of us can afford it. I don't think that's a good idea. So anyhow, Back to this post. Should waiters get minimum wage? Well, that depends. Where is that money going to come from? Most waiters make somewhere between $2.12 and $2.50 an hour. You're going to raise that to $7.25 an hour. You're pretty much tripling the waiters' wages. Okay, where is that money going to come from? Out of that 3% profit that the average restaurant makes? That's not that arithmetic doesn't work. In this case, the only place that extra money to pay the waiters minimum wage can come from is by raising the cost of the food. And you know what? Instead of just making it the current minimum wage, let's make it that $15 an hour that everybody is clamoring for. You have just raised the waiters' wages by 5 times. And so now we've really got to wonder, where is that money going to come from? Think of this. If the cost of the food in your favorite restaurant were to double or triple, would you still eat there? A lot of people wouldn't. And this not only affects companies which employ their employees at minimum wage, this affects every employer in the country who's paying less than $15 an hour. And when you add it all up, the money that you would have to come up with to raise everyone to $15 an hour, it's a number so big that my smartphone calculator could not handle it. I tried to figure out how much money it would take, and it just gave me an error message. So again, where is it supposed to come from? Is the owner just supposed to pull it out of his butt? I mean, really. If the cost of the food in your favorite restaurant were to double or triple, a lot of people would stop eating there. And it's not going to take much of a drop in that restaurant's business over a significant period of time to put them under. And then everyone, from the waiters to the bussers to the kitchen staff to the management, they are all out of work now. So who have you helped? But this question is really worth going into. Where does money come from? It comes from someplace. Some people think that there just is so much money to go around, and if I have more, it's because somebody else has less. And the only way that I can get more is to take it from someone else. But that is, well, consider this. About 70,000 years ago, something really horrendous happened on the earth. We don't know what it was right now. There are theories, but it nearly wiped out the human race. They figure there may have been as few as 1,500 people alive on the earth. They call it the population bottleneck. Now, let's take a look at money. How much money is there in the world? Total. Well, some people, I mean, there are different estimates, but a good solid estimate is $60 trillion in the world. Okay, now let's divide 60 trillion by 1,500. Okay, every one of those 1,500 had so much money that my smartphone calculator couldn't handle that number. Now you're saying that's ridiculous. That money didn't exist then, right? Okay, well, if it didn't exist then, and it does exist now, somewhere along the line, it had to be created. Remember that if anybody's seen the Austin Powers movies, there is the scene where Dr. Evil threatens to fire the giant laser at the moon unless all the governments of the world pay him $100 billion. What was his name? Tim Robbins.
I think he said $1 million.
No. He said $100 billion. And the president laughed at him. Everyone with the president laughed at him. And remember what they said? They said, this is 1969. That amount of money doesn't even exist. So even then, you know, it didn't exist then. It does exist now. So where did it come from? Where does money come from? Well, of course, the money itself comes from a printing press. But the dollar bill you hold in your hand is just a piece of paper. It's the idea behind it that counts. It is a tangible symbol of value. So where did the value come from? Well, the fact is that the only thing that produces value is the labor of people. Now, in some models, in the communist economic model, labor is the only thing that produces value, and labor always produces value. Let's say I have a bucket of sand, okay? And I put on some gloves and I start pounding this sand with my fists. That is labor. I'm laboring away at pounding this sand. So if I pay myself minimum wage at the end of the week, this bucket of sand is going to be worth $290. If I keep pounding it for a month, it's going to be worth $1,160. Well, we all know, just intuitively know that isn't true. For labor to produce value, it has to produce value for someone else. Okay? Your labor for your boss has to produce increased value for his enterprise. It has to produce something that he can sell to the public, a product or a service. And that extra value that he gets from them is what he has to pay you. And that's all he has to pay you. So let's say we just arbitrarily raise everyone to the minimum wage. Now, in the case of the restaurant, let's make it, like I said, let's make it a living wage of $15. Okay, but then we have to define a living wage. A living wage for who? Let's say you got these two construction workers, right? They're both doing the same job. One of them is single and has no kids. The other one has a stay-at-home wife and 4 kids. Okay? He's not going to be able to make a living for that family on the same wage that this other guy is doing. He's going to have a higher living wage. Okay? So you can't really say what a living wage is and just put it at a number. And that also brings up another problem. You're going to have to pay the same guy, or one guy, more for his to be a living wage than the other guy. But isn't that income disparity? Don't we want to have equal pay for equal work? So how's that going to work out? And I got to tell you, if one of those guys is a woman, then you are really in for an ass whooping. But how's it going to play out in this restaurant scenario? Like I said, $15 is about 5 times what the average tipped employee makes. So that you double the price of the food, maybe even triple it, to be able to pay all these waiters and waitresses and bussers and kitchen staff. People stop patronizing the restaurant. It goes out of business. Now all these people are out of work. And since they're out of work, they don't have the money to buy all the things they used to buy from all the people they used to buy them from. So guess what? Now those businesses go out of work. Now you've got even more people out of work who cannot afford to buy the things they used to buy, which means more businesses go out of business, which even more people out of work. It piles up on top of each other. And when you've got massive amounts of people who are out of work and cannot afford to buy the things they used to buy, what do you call that? You call it a depression. And certainly that's not the only way that depressions can get underway, but that is certainly one of the ways they can start. So, back to the Facebook post. One of the things this woman said in the original reply to my comment was that employers, you should be mad at the employer who is requiring you to work for tips. This raises the question, how can anyone require you to work for tips when they can't require you to work for them at all? Of course, there have been places where people were required to work for employers. Remember what we called those? Yeah, China, North Korea, Burma. Okay, but in the United States, employment is voluntary. on both sides. Most states in the United States have what they call employment at will, which means that unless you've got a contract, your situation with your employer can be terminated by either of you at any time for any reason. You don't have to work for anyone. What a lot of people don't realize is that your labor is your product. It is what you have to offer. And you most of the time sell it to the highest bidder, the most money you can get. Now, if you don't think your employer is paying you what you're worth, find another one who will. Okay? Go out, put in job applications, go to interviews, tell them you won't work for less than $15 an hour. Okay? That's your price for your product. The danger in that is that you may find that no one is willing to pay you that $15. And the fact is, if that happens, what it means is your labor is not worth $15 an hour. Okay? What makes anything worth a certain amount? How many times have you gone into a store? This happened to me a couple of times just this week. I was with my wife in the store, and I saw a neat little frying pan, just big enough for one hamburger. It was pretty cool, and I looked at the price, and it was $15, and I said, no, it's not that cool. It's not worth it to me. That's the key right there. It was not worth it to me. Do you know what that means? It's not worth $15. Okay? The value of anything is not determined by the amount the person who produced it wants to get paid. The value is the maximum amount that other people are willing to pay you for it. Take the price too high, and no one will pay that much. Why? Because it's not worth it. It's literally true. It's literally not worth it. Take the price down to where most people will pay that price. That is the value of the product. So if you're not getting paid what you're worth, and your employer is looks like they're never going to pay you what you're worth, well, you can increase your worth. You can increase the value of your labor. How do you do that? Education. But it doesn't even have to be education. It can be experience. It can be loyalty to your employer. It can be your work ethic. These things over time increase your value as an employee. They increase the value of your product, your labor. And you can demand a higher wage. I heard of one man was being interviewed for some sort of news article, and it was about minimum wage. And he said that he had worked for his employer, and in this case, I think it was McDonald's. Oh, I've worked here for 20 years, and I'm still only making minimum wage. Okay. Well, there's only two possibilities there. One, in 20 years, he never gave his boss a single reason to give him a raise or promote him. Or, for 20 years, he willingly sold his labor for far less than it's worth. If your boss isn't giving you what you think you're worth, take steps to increase your worth. Education. Live beneath your means. Earn a raise. Save that money for education. Over time, it'll build up. And don't tell me you can't do it. Millions of people have. My first job was for $5 an hour. Now, however indiscreet I'm being here, I make over $50,000 a year. Okay, I did not come from privilege. Was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. My family has absolutely no surplus of good luck or good fortune. So, and you know what? My wife makes even more money than I do. She did not come from privilege either. As a matter of fact, she spent several years of her life in what we would consider dire poverty. And now she makes more money than I do. So don't tell me you can't do it. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. If we could do it, you could do it. Find a way. And that's really the difference, isn't it? I and people like me believe that you can do it. We believe that you are smart enough and capable enough to better your own situation. And if you need some help in doing that, bettering your own situation, there are plenty of people just like me who are willing to give you that help. The people who want to raise the minimum wage for you so that you never have to better your situation, they don't believe that you can. And yet, they are your friends and we're your enemies? Okay. Well, once again, we've come to the end of the show. Once again, I borrowed from a chapter in this book, Dangerous Subversive Heresies. But once again, I left enough in there that you will still enjoy reading the chapter on minimum wage. It's got an even better, clearer explanation of how the economics of this stuff works than I've given you here tonight. I didn't want to give it all away, so I didn't just take it word from word from the book. Let me tell you something about this book. There is a woman I know. How shall I put it? I often get the urge to put the word comrade in front of her name. She has had this book in her possession for a couple of months now. And she is not one to hold back when she has an opinion. Do you know how much I've heard from her about this book? Nothing. Believe me, if there were good, solid, liberal arguments discrediting the ideas in this book, I would have heard about them by now. But I haven't, and that should tell you something. The book, Dangerous Subversive Heresies, available on Amazon.com. This YouTube show, if you're watching it on YouTube, you can share it one of two ways. Well, first of all, you can click the little subscribe button beneath the screen. That will subscribe you to Jackie Smith's YouTube channel, where you can hear every episode of Dangerous Subversive Radio and every episode of Community Service Radio. And speaking of Community Service Radio, COMMSR.com. That is Jackie Smith's blog. You can see all the episodes of both YouTube shows there. You can also leave comments. And we would love to hear comments. If there is something that you would like to hear me discuss on this show, leave us a comment on the blog. You can also reach me on Facebook. If you want to know how to spell my name, here it is right on the front of the book. And that's about it. Let's see, email. Jackie, where can they reach us at email?
Well, you can reach us at jackie.smith.commsr.com. All
right, there we go. Well, that's going to wrap it up for show number 8. We came in just about on time, I see. We'll try to do that again next week for show number 9. I hope you come back. I hope you bring some friends. I hope you grow to be 100 million strong. But right now, I hope you have a good night.